Trafficking is on the rise. Anyone with information on the missing persons is urged to contact crime. Another girl has gone missing. Come on! So far increases alarmingly rampant sex trade industry.
It astounds me that not only does human trafficking exist on the earth today.
Really fast. I think sometimes when we think about human trafficking, we think of the movie Taken, and we think of somebody being shoved into a van and kidnapped and taken against their will. And while that does happen, it's very minute amount of percentage of the cases. It is everyday people, and the reality is every person is at risk.
I moved to the private sector in 2013. We had prosecuted more human trafficking cases than in any other district in the United States.
If they're interested in this, they really need to get educated on the issue, and we need to really stop with compartmentalizing these victims into good victims and whores. We really need to look at this as a human rights violation.
And the reason is because organized crime is realizing that human trafficking is a renewable commodity, that human beings are a renewable commodity.
It comes in all shapes and sizes. I mean, human trafficking is kind of a big, it's kind of a big thing, and I'm sure you figured that it is labor trafficking in a whole bunch of different ways. It is sex trafficking, force, fraud, and coercion to make men and women and children commit sexual acts for money.
Human trafficking is modern-day slavery. It is a problem that is in nearly every city, including our own. We investigated this issue by interviewing professionals who encountered human trafficking in their careers.
Question 1. From your experience, how widespread is human trafficking in the Kansas City area?
I have been a reporter at the Star for 10 years, and in 2009, our executive editor, Mike Fannin, had decided that he wanted to do a story on human trafficking. And he pulled one of our investigative reporters at that time, Mike McGraw, in and said, we want to do this. We want to look at everything from labor trafficking to sex trafficking to just overall human trafficking. And I was brought in to look specifically at sex trafficking and the victims of both. Mm-hmm. And then another reporter, Mark Morris, looked at labor trafficking, because it's typically human trafficking is viewed as a coastal problem, not in the middle of the Midwest. So what we found is it is a Midwest problem, and actually, it's a huge problem here because it's not something that people are aware of, and the victims are kind of hidden in plain sight. It's what we have termed it, and what others have termed it as well.
Okay. Yes. I'm Christy Childs. Mm-hmm. I'm the founder and director of Veronica's Voice. Over the past 14 years, we've been in existence 15 years, but over the past 14 years, we ran a safe center. We are now in the development. We phased out all of our safe center programming, and we have been strictly focused on the home that we're getting. And actually, we just got back from Nashville, which is our model at Thistle Farms. So we're modeling their Magdalene House program. And working towards that end.
So, how widespread is human trafficking in the Kansas City area from your perspective, from the women that you came across, research that you have done?
I work with American women and girls, and while we haven't seen a huge population of girls, we have seen, some girls, some boys. But the majority of what we've seen and worked with are the women. And any given year, we were working with over 500. Mm-hmm. We were doing so much with so little resources, and it was just quite overwhelming. And then having to have those women leave at the end of the day was extremely heartbreaking. And I would say human trafficking, which it includes other aspects of this. What we really focus on are women, at this point, especially with the housing. It's going to be women who are dealing with dual diagnosis of a drug addiction, but that have been, of course, commercially sexually exploited.
Human trafficking has existed in Kansas City for many years, and today cases are found because now people are looking for them. The U.S. Attorney's Office in the Western District of Missouri has covered 38 cases of human trafficking since 2011. This evidence is thanks to programs that combat trafficking. Other evidence is also found.
Question 2. What evidence of human trafficking have you encountered?
We, as the Attorney General, don't have jurisdiction to prosecute crime unless we're asked to assist by a local prosecutor. But the things that are most telling for them are electronic media evidence, because those things, they get preserved and or there's just no way around them. And folks get more and more careless as they get more and more involved in this. And so we get them with the electronic media. They use texts and Facebook things that they post, crazy carelessness.
I'm Dr. Kathy Miller. I am the Research and Healthcare Education Developer Consultant for Shared Hope International, and I am also adjunct nursing faculty for Baylor University Louise Harrington School of Nursing. And I have a master's degree in nursing and a PhD in nursing, and my dissertation topic was child sex trafficking and educating healthcare providers and developing an education system for recognizing and intervening with human trafficking victims in a healthcare setting. There are no frameworks for healthcare providers in caring for victims, and there's no best practices. Mm-hmm. And I have worked in level 1 and level 2 trauma centers caring for victims and survivors for over 15 years. And that's how I got interested in finding out how I could do more of taking care of these people in the emergency room. When you look at the reasons, the biggest reason that researchers say that we don't have those hard numbers is because healthcare providers are not trained to recognize these individuals. Studies show, and here's where you get those crazy kind of differences in numbers, that 28% to 90% of victims will see a healthcare provider at least once while they're in captivity of their trafficker. And so that is a huge opportunity for healthcare providers to intervene. However, if they don't have the training, then they can't. So my objective is to develop the first ever research that identifies the most important elements of an education program for healthcare providers on how to recognize and how to intervene and how to refer. And so,
the more education medical professionals receive, the more evidence can be found.
Not only do healthcare providers help to find evidence, but also your local newspapers.
Well, back in 2009, the newspaper wanted to do something large with human trafficking, because we felt like it was an emerging issue, still very hidden then. I mean, it was you couldn't find much information about it. Even talking with police officers and those sorts of people in law enforcement. And so I got involved because I was covering federal courts as a full-time reporter. And at that time, the U.S. Attorney's Office filed a huge criminal case in what they call the GLS case, Giant Labor Solutions, which was at that time the largest human trafficking case, labor trafficking case ever charged in the United States.
What else did you find along the lines of evidence whenever you were on the cases that you used to just kind of prove once again that this is an issue in Kansas City?
We have found over the years since then that domestic servitude is certainly an issue here. And a couple of years ago, they prosecuted the local consul for the Taiwanese government in Kansas City for for bringing a woman to the United States and essentially locking her in the apartment for a couple of years. Two women, locking her in an apartment for a couple of years and not paying her properly and doing all doing those sorts of things. It's not it comes in all shapes and sizes.
I sat with people here locally who would tell me about young girls who were brought over here that they thought for a legitimate legal job. They came over here legally, and then they were told, no, that's not why you're here, and then they were made sex slaves inside homes or labor slaves for nanny jobs. And so I did, through anecdotal evidence, find victims here, but nobody who would talk to me personally, and then the authorities claimed that because they were working on the big labor trafficking case. So I did talk to people in Texas and California, and I found one victim here that was traveling through the Midwest, and she was middle-aged. She had come over from China. I'm believing it's China now. She had come over from China, and she was scouting out colleges for her son, and they had to use all their savings to come over here, and for her to come over first, and then her husband and her son would join her. And she landed in California, got a job. She thought it was going to be at a Chinese restaurant, and she went, and automatically the person said, oh, I have this other thing, you can become a massage therapist. And, then showed her what the diploma looked like, and so she had gone, and she said, well, that's better, that's more money, and she had done that. Well, she ended up being a, sex trafficking victim that was going cross-country, and she was arrested outside of Columbia at a truck stop, and she, went to jail, and she actually stayed 5 months. In that time, though, there was an advocate in the Columbia-Boone County area who had noticed her name on the jail list and said, yeah, I don't think she is a suspect, I think she's a victim. I interviewed several survivors at that point because they had gone through the therapy and they call themselves survivors, no longer victims. And one young woman had come here from Indonesia 19 years before, and she had become basically a slave for a family for 19 years, and it turned into sex trafficking. It started out as labor trafficking. She wasn't allowed to sleep on a bed. She had to sleep on the floor. She wasn't allowed to go to the bathroom inside. She had to go outside. And they were treated like animals. And another woman I spoke with had come over from Guatemala and to work at a sewing factory. And she was forced to work up to 20 hours a day, not given her pay. Her passports were taken. And so, and she said that her boss had told her, I could kill you and no one would care, but if I killed a dog, they would. And
human trafficking is not confined to one institution. It covers a various amount of jobs, such as labor trafficking, sexual exploitation, workers in domestic servitude, and many others.
Question 3. Why is human trafficking prevalent in Kansas City specifically?
Why do human trafficking and slavery continue to exist in Kansas City?
It's all about money, as Ann indicated. They talk about gangs and how a new front in human trafficking is gangs, because they used to make their money selling illegal things, but they'd have to acquire illegal things to sell. And so you got to buy a gun to sell a gun. But for people, they get for free, and they can sell them over and over and over and over again. So it's about money, and gangs are now in this where they never were before because it's so much easier.
In by the year 2017, different literature and different experts have recognized that human trafficking is going to surpass arms and drug sales as far as organized crime revenue. And that's because you can only sell that, I'm sure you've seen this, you can only sell that firearm or that kilo of cocaine once. but that 12-year-old you can sell indefinitely. So they see this high profit margin and low risk, and therefore high profit margin, low risk, high demand, increase in incidence.
Why do you think slavery still exists and persists today in the Kansas City area?
Well, we have poverty. We have child abuse. We have a society that really objectifies women and girls, and dehumanizes and exploits. This is a very profitable market. We live in a capitalist society, so I mean, it's just, and it's happening everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, not just Kansas City, and not just cities, not big cities, little cities. I mean, it's happening in rural areas and everywhere. So there's a lot of different factors that feed into it, but and it happens because men buy sex.
And I spoke to several women who, they would, after a bust, and this is so big here because in Southwest Missouri there are all the factories and that employ immigrants, and you just have to know that these people are being treated correctly. But they would, after a bust at a factory, they would just load everybody on a bus and go down the aisle and say, "Are you a victim? Are you a victim? Are you a trafficking victim?" And one thing that immigrants have a real hard time doing is trusting authorities. They're told by the people who bring them over here and who are their traffickers that, if you turn us in, if you do anything, we are going to go to your village and we're going to kill your family. And I spoke to many people who had been told that. And that's why this problem can be so hard to prevent, especially when you're looking at foreign victims, is because they know the person that trafficked them in the first place. They know their village, they know their mother, they know their father, and, so they don't want to speak up. They don't want to say anything. And when the government was telling them, "Will you help us prosecute, and then we'll help you," that was just, I don't know that the people we talked to thought the government should be doing that. The help should come first. Then when they're strong enough, then they can decide to prosecute or
law enforcement has done. Why do you think human trafficking is still such a big issue in Kansas City? Why does it continue?
That's easy. Because we, at least on the labor side, we just have this huge desire for cheap labor, okay? We have this huge desire for cheap labor, and human trafficking, and the traffickers just supply that. They just supply that, one of the things when you talk to industry lobbyists on who lobby Congress on the H-2B question, one of the things they always point out is that, well, these are really jobs that Americans don't want to do, and they also dump unfairly on younger workers, saying, "Oh, they're this new generation's kind of lazy and they don't like this whole slacker thing, and that's just and I think that's just not the case. The reason the reason people don't want these jobs is not because they're any worse than any other job. It's just they don't pay anything, And and we have this desire to have people work for us and not pay them much at all. So cheap labor is sort of the reason for that.
Quick and easy profit, cheap labor, it all comes down to money. Human trafficking will continue until it is no longer profitable. We as a community can help this cause.
Final question. What can individuals and society do about this issue?
I mean, so there's all these intersecting social issue problems that connect to this problem. And we can make it better, but it's going to take a community. And, with what we're doing with modeling the Magdalene program, and we're going to, change lives because we're going to focus on a small amount of people for a very long time. which is not what gets people, that's not what gets government grants. That's not what gets a lot of foundational grants, because we're not going to have all these numbers. When we had all these numbers, we were still having a difficulty because we were so overwhelmed with the work. And, so just changing lives and seeing women really find their way home. And it's going to take this community to help us to do that. And we want the community to partner with us in that, because what I've seen happen in Nashville, it's so mind-blowing, and it makes my heart feel real big, And the motto is love heals, and we can bring these women home.
At one point, and I'm forgetting the date, but at one point they had enforced and rewritten some trafficking laws, and they had recognized domestic trafficking as a form of trafficking, an American-born, but they didn't give any funding to the therapy and to the, helping of these victims. I think since they're trying to put more funding into that avenue. So I think, there is a lot being done here in Kansas City and across the country to identify and help, but I still think the prevention, even here locally, is not what it needs to be.
With that, what can society do to address the problem and perhaps become more aware?
Now, back in 2009, I don't think they were aware at all. And I don't think they understood what trafficking was. I don't think they understood the difference between international trafficking and domestic trafficking. I think that when people thought of trafficking, it was always sexual trafficking and not necessarily the labor. And the victimization in both can be so severe. And so I do think that the awareness has increased quite a bit in the last 6 years. And one thing that everybody wants to know when something like this, and people are being actual modern-day slaves, they want to know, what can we do? What can we do to prevent it? What can we do to help? And when I got those calls back in 2009 and 2010, there really wasn't much to say other than a lot of churches took this on as a project. So they would raise money, or they would contact their legislators and try to figure out something to change laws. And I think that was very effective. But today, when I'm in a hotel and I may see an immigrant worker, I'm just very cognizant to make sure, I know it sounds corny, but to make sure I feel like they're okay. I think personal instincts go a long way. And I know that the calls to law enforcement increased after we did the project. And we heard across the country from people, because it was really one of the first major investigative articles on human trafficking, and really opened people's eyes. And since then, other papers have jumped in and written stories, and TV stations have done stories of, the project won the Robert F. Kennedy Award for Journalism, and at the time, Robert F. Kennedy's widow had told us, that we gave voice to the voiceless. And I think every paper and every newspaper that does that is, is helping on that journey.
But because of this, it's changed what I do, how I live sometimes. When I stay in a hotel in the United States, I probably leave a little more money for the people who clean the rooms, knowing now that they're not getting much money at all, and they could probably use it,
What you can do to help is to educate yourself and the community around you, call the police or hotlines if you see suspicious behavior, support local businesses that use free labor, or donate to an NGO that fights human trafficking. Dr. Kathy Miller leaves us with this quote from Mother Teresa.
She alone cannot change the world, but she can cast the stone that creates the ripple. And in my presentations, I tell them that together, we all create a tidal wave, and that does change the world. So what you say to people in the community, to individuals, is that you may not think you make a difference, but you do. Just by your awareness, if you see something, say something. You are at the store. You're in school. For instance, there was a ring busted here in Houston last year that was running a ring of 10 high school girls out of a local high school that were being trafficked out of the local high school. Look at all the mothers, all the teachers, all the other kids that interacted with those girls, and they never knew. So there's lots of opportunities. If you see something, say something, and don't think you don't make a difference, because you do.